Now, the key feature of these models is what he called a constant success function, but the paper that I looked at called it a conflict success function, not constant, and I'm not sure what the difference is there. But the idea is that it's analogous to a production function. And I think that's a really important point that has to be made early in the paper, is that we're economists. We talk about inputs in, outputs out. Here we talk about contenders to contestants, and they divide the resources between directed activities and fighting activities. And what this conflict success function does, tells you how successful you are in the conflict, is it determines the proportion of the prize that is obtained by each contender based on their relative fighting efforts. So it's like a payoff function in a game, all right? And I think that needs to be up front. Now, there are two main forms of this conflict success function. One is where the relative success of the two parties is determined by the ratio of their fighting efforts. Okay, so it's F1 over F2. The other is where the relative success is determined by the difference between the fighting efforts, F1 minus F2. And he referred to the difference method, but I think, again, early on this needs to be clear. And then what's called the mass effect parameter is important because it indexes the decisiveness of the conflict, and that was his variable K. I believe, is that right? Mm-hmm. Okay, and that comes in different mathematical forms, as say the exponent in the first one, you get up with a ratio of 1 divided by the other, and then so the exponent of that ratio tells you how important that's going to be. Let's try again. All right. Now, of course, the rent-seeking model is the Tulloch model of conflict over a fixed prize as a lottery, and as he spent less time on this model, but did talk about it fairly well in his talk. Used to this. All right. Now, the author does a good job of relating his observations to his models, and that's the strength of the paper. For example, his assumption that the assumption in the production conflict model that conflict is limited, all right? And he says, well, let's see, the Taliban, and he showed this with his pictures, which I thought was nice. The man sitting there, he could be Taliban, he could be not, but they cannot be completely destroyed because of their ability to melt away into the population. Okay, so you can't have an all-out unconditional victory over the Taliban, at least in this small area, because if they start to lose, they disappear. The police, on the other hand, and he didn't mention this, but it's quite important, the police cannot be completely destroyed either because they can always call in NATO airstrikes and artillery. Right? There was the mention about the artillery hitting the farmer's house. But that's really important too. So if a fire base is about to be overrun, then they call in the air power, and that stops the battle from being too decisive the other way. So this was an example of a good job he did in taking the observations he made and fitting them to his model. So his conclusions I thought were insightful but distressing. The insightful but distressing conclusion that both sides, so I did this in a hurry. For both sides, it is in the best interest for the war to go on indefinitely in the area that was studied. I think I was rushing out to lunch when I did this. I'm sorry. So, now, some suggestions. The first suggestion, and this is really important, is to add a section on the intuition of the two models right up front, even before the literature review. Then slim down the literature review, lots of papers, as it is to show the reader where your model comes from and how it fits into the literature, and therefore how you're contributing. Okay? And then I would also try to work that intuition in through the analysis portion as well. There are so many of your diagrams, and you showed some of them here with your pictures, that the reader loses track a little bit without a little more basis for understanding what each of these parameters that you're showing is really saying. So I think a little bit more integration is what is needed. But I like the paper, and it's really different kind of thing for an economics paper.
Thank you.